Tonight on The Big Show, we have special guest Josh Morris of the Everything Paranormal Show. He'll be joining me as we discuss the veils between the living and the dead, the material and the spiritual. Are these veils thinner? Is it easier to communicate? Is it easier for spirits to pass through portals or gateways during this time of year? Is there something different that allows this to happen? Join us next as we take a look at this in theorycraft, discover its origins, and take you for a ride through the rabbit hole. And welcome to The Big Show, everyone. Tonight, like I said in the intro, we got a very, very special guest in Josh Morris. I met Josh, and like I said, he's the host of the Everything Paranormal Show. You can also check out his website and catch him on Facebook. I will throw all the links up to that at the end of the video. And I think he's about to add a new title to all this. So for my fans that are out there that don't know Josh, tell us a little about yourself, bud.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Rich, thank you for having me on the show. I look forward to it. But yeah, I've been involved in paranormal off and on for the last 25 years. And really in these last few years, I've gotten really into just in-depth theories and really elevated, my paranormal research to a new level. Before all that, I had like a paranormal investigation team down in Florida for a while there, and so that was great and everything. But now this is all where I'm into the theories and sharing those on my social media. And in fact, as of hopefully the airing of this show, I will have launched my very first paranormal book. It's going to be called My Paranormal, A Guide to the Spirit Realms.
Awesome.
And you should be able to get it on Amazon in paperback and an ebook.
That is awesome, brother. That is sweet. I know that you've been trying to keep this a secret and keep it hush hush. I've talked to you into the wee hours past the midnight hour, you describing a little bit about what's in there and your theories and things. And I'm gonna tell you what, dude, it is very captivating, and I can't wait for it to come out, man. You have a deep mind, man, and I think people are gonna be amazed at what they read, because some of the stuff that you put out there totally makes sense. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's going to cover all the theories and kind of the big picture, how everything comes together. So,
Right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, tonight, folks, this is with us coming towards the Halloween season and getting into the fall time. I know it's one of everyone's favorite time of year for trick-or-treating and candy and parties and dressing up and the paranormal and the spiritual side. But I wanted to bring Josh on tonight, not only to discuss that, but maybe to take a look back at the history and how Halloween was created, the origins. And I know you're pretty knowledgeable there. And go ahead and drop it on us, brother.
well, I think, whenever we start looking at the veil between life and death, often people, start looking at Halloween and want to get spooked and all that stuff. And you really have to kind of go back and look at the origins of Halloween, because again, there's a lot of myths out there. People aren't sure, was there some big rituals and all these different things. And the Halloween that we know it today really had a big journey, and there was quite a few things that kind of all culminated to that time of year. But I guess the first thing to really look back is where did it really start? What was the original intent behind everything? And for that, you probably have to go back thousands of years ago to the Celts. The Celts back then, they had a calendar that was divided into really two halves. You had a light half and a dark half. And of course, on October 31st, they would have a big festival, the Samhain Festival, Harvest Festival. And this was to celebrate a few things, actually. One was to celebrate the harvest. Harvest was extremely crucial back then. You know, this was a matter of life and death.
Absolutely.
And in fact, they faced quite a bit of death numerous times. And also around this time, they were also, this is where they believed that time and space sort of started blending together. The worlds between the living and the dead, the veil was at its thinnest. That's what they believed. And that at this time, the spirits could actually commingle. And sometimes people could even get lost in those worlds uh,
Hmm.
accidentally. So it's very interesting. So they would have these big bonfires, right?
Hmm.
They would celebrate with these big bonfires, which were, you know, symbolistic of everything, and the light helping people, guiding them with light. Uh, and this actually is where we got our first symbol of Halloween, which was bats. Yeah, they were attracted to the bonfires because of the insects. So bats started becoming part of that story time
Okay.
for those festivals. So
That's something that's very interesting. It's just something that the average day person I wouldn't think about. Like, how did bats get incorporated? And wow, yeah, totally makes sense. And in my limited knowledge of this, I've never went back and just really researched it. But I also, and I'm sure you know this, but it was also a crucial time for the druids and the seers as well,
oh
because
yeah.
they felt that these bonfires, if the spirits were able to come through, that more knowledge was given to the seers or the druids, therefore their predictions on weather and things like that would help them make it for the next harvest, and also help them make it through the cold winter months.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh yeah, and you're absolutely right, because in fact, many other cultures around the world have some type of day that they celebrate the dead.
Hmm.
So I mean, if you just look at a lot of cultures, again, you'll find where at least sometime in their calendar year they celebrate the dead. So, and what you were talking about actually makes sense because um, you know, one of the things, if you look at hospice workers,
Hmm.
they will tell you that when dealing with patients that are about to die, like through that slow death process, the veil seems to be at its thinnest toward their death, and it's almost like they have one eye in the dead world. They can actually see their dead relatives standing there, sometimes a week before they even die.
Hmm.
So when that veil becomes really thin, so it would make sense that the druids you're talking about, if that veil is really thin, then they would be able to have that one eye into that other
Sure.
world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've said this before. Everything has a reason, and it all comes together at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But you know
Well,
who you can, you know who you can thank uh for saving Halloween?
who's that?
The church.
There we go. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, the churches is what saved Halloween in a way, I guess you'd say, because had they not intervened in what I'm about to explain, then probably some of the things that were set in motion may not have ended up happening. We may not have had the Halloween we know today. So you can thank the churches.
Hey.
Um, so what it was is, again, just like we talked about, other cultures and things, they had their days to celebrate the dead. Well, the Roman pagans, okay, they actually had a day on May 13th,
Hmm.
Lemuria.
Hmm.
If I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sorry. But Lemuria was a day when they would, it was one of their big days where they would celebrate the dead, the larvae that would rise up and haunt people. So what the Roman pagans did was to quell the dead, they would offer up milk or little cakes.
Hmm.
Okay. So you can see there's already a little bit of offering stuff to the dead. We're already kind of getting into a little bit of that. But anyway, so the church stepped in. They didn't, you know, the churches wanted to stamp out pagan rituals and things like that. So what they did is they said, you know what? Let's co-opt this. And they stepped in and they declared, hey, we're going to have a day that is going to be All Saints Day. And it's going to be on May 13th. And
Hmm.
basically followed a lot of the same rituals. And it was a day to honor the most honorable of dead Christians.
Okay.
So, but actually, in fact, this actually worked, and a lot of people back then, it converted them to the church or whatever. It was so popular
Sure.
that they decided to move it. Okay, and guess what? They moved it on November 1st, and it was called All Hallows Day.
That's right.
See, now if we go back to what we just talked about, see, you had your Samhain festival from the Celts on the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
So people were started to refer to as All Hallows Eve because it was the evening before the new All Hallows Day.
Uh-huh.
So as we go through time, you can see we went from the All Hallows Day, All Hallows Eve, to Hallows Eve to Halloween.
Right.
So that was kind of a little bit of the name. And now you can see here the church brought a little more closer to that Samhain festival. So now you have that Samhain festival, and you have that All Hallows Day that's honoring some dead. Well, guess what? The church decided to add a day on the 2nd, November 2nd, to honor everyday dead Christians. So they kept this spookiness going with honoring the dead. And so they had All Souls Day on the 2nd. Right. So now again, see, you're getting some of these days, it's all about the dead. So it's kind of getting dark. Again, this is where the church actually is the ones that kind of perpetuated the spookiness.
Sure. That's kind of ironic.
Yeah. And but yeah, and this is actually where we start seeing some of the precursors to trick-or-treating.
Okay. Yeah. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong. The All Souls Day didn't that have something to do where they, the children would walk around to the different homes and they would offer to cleanse the house?
Well, they would actually go souling.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And they would knock on the door and see what it was is that the church, the churches had convinced people, listen, because purgatory is big, especially with Catholics. Okay. And a lot of things was very pro-Catholic back then, but Catholics believe in purgatory. Okay. That level that's not quite hell. It's, and there's still a lot of pain and anguish, but the churches had convinced people that if you offer up prayers, the more prayers that are offered, you can actually start freeing souls from purgatory to go up to heaven. Okay. So these kids were going around and doing the souling and they would knock on doors, and in return for spiced cakes, they would offer prayers to the dead.
There we go.
So this is, again, a little bit of a precursor to trick-or-treating.
Sure. That's amazing. So we had the Celts, we had the church intervene, and kind of the Christians kind of took and molded it and actually made it a little more spooky, took and moved it from the springtime to the fall, kind of with the Samhain.
Right, and they moved that around 609 AD, I believe.
Okay.
Just to kind of give you a time frame of when they actually moved it.
So from the 609 AD, when they moved that, how long did it kind of just stay level like that until we see more changes in Halloween or All Hallows Eve, or is it pronounced Samhain?
Yeah, I'm sure really they kept on with a lot of the same traditions for many years. It's not really until we get to about the Middle Ages when we start adding more elements. Again, over the years, all the centuries, this is what will eventually shape up. All the symbols of Halloween come together. And actually the journey of Halloween, we actually end up in the Middle Ages, because this is when we start the witch hunt.
Yes. The good old witch hunt.
Yes. Yes. The in Europe and even in the new colonies in America, the Puritans, the colonial Puritan stuff. Again, witches became it was almost like a trend back then. If you want to use the word trend from nowadays, back then the trend was witches. So, and a lot of times they were usually women. A lot of these women were, mostly like the healers.
Sure.
And they were kind of eccentric. We're talking about the I don't even know what to compare them to nowadays. I don't want to insult anybody, but you know, they're like the eccentric people, the healers. Maybe if you want to call them like the naturalists or something, you know, healers,
Shamans.
new age, I guess, for back then.
Hmm.
But they were healers that were handed these maybe spells or just different things from their generations. But in any case, you know, a lot of the iconic stuff like the broom and the cats and the cauldrons. Well, first of all, the cauldrons were an everyday tool, anyways, back then. Everybody
Sure.
had them.
Hmm.
But again, you had your witch, and you had your cats hanging out by the hearth, and they had, you know, a lot of times they were having the brooms, and of course the brooms turned into transportation, you know, and things like
Right.
that. So, so with the whole witch hunt, the classic image, these were just all as stories progress and urban legends back then, as they were like,
Hmm.
oh, so and so's a witch. Did you see she had her broom and she was riding her broom? And you know, I mean, like all the urban legends just started taking all the everyday symbols that were
Hmm.
associated with these women and really defined what we know even today as the witch.
Right. Well, just a real quick note on that, and a positive note is before it became this crusade of evil, witches were looked to by many villagers to be healed. You know, hence the term witch doctor, or you
Right.
know,
Shamans and
they
stuff.
dabbled in potions. Not, I say potions, elixirs, salves,
Right.
and things of this stuff, and it was all natural barks and moss and
Yeah.
mushrooms. So I mean, they were legitimate healers, and maybe some of them dabbled a little darker than others, and you know, for that they all paid a price, which was, you know, sad.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother subject in itself.
Oh yeah, it's a whole nother episode.
But that's how we got witches. I think probably the next few things that started to become associated around that time frame would be masks, and of
Ah,
course
yes.
it kind of starts going a little hand in hand with rowdiness, because around the 17th century, you started getting a lot of these rowdy beggars that,
Mhm.
you know, just demanded, they started drinking alcohol, and then the demand for food and drink became pretty excessive. And so masks helped hide their identity when they were getting a little rowdy.
Mhm.
And in fact, even in Britain, they would go around and put on masks, and they would do these plays, and they would go door to door, a lot of times getting paid in food and drink or money.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but sometimes things could get a little rowdy. But it really wasn't until this next section when we really get into the rowdiness of Halloween.
Well, let's let's not waste any time. Let's delve into it, because I mean, you've got me. I'm uh, I'm like, I guess, a kid in a candy store right now. I'm like, ooh, let me hear more.
Well,
Um,
Guy Fawkes. Have you ever heard the story of Guy Fawkes?
Briefly, yes, I know a little of it, but I'm sure you can tell a good story.
Well, Guy Fawkes was a pro-Catholic terrorist,
Right.
and again, this was actually in the early 1600s. It's around 1605, and he actually tried to blow up the House of Lords,
Mm-hmm.
and he was unsuccessful. I mean, we're talking tons of black powder. I mean, this dude could have done it, but he was found guilty. He was hung. Then they actually drew and quartered his body, and they threw
Mm-hmm.
the pieces in the fire.
Right.
Well, this was on November 5th. Okay. So remember our timelines now. We had the Samhain Festival and All Hallows Day and the Souling Day. Well, now on November 5th, kids, to mock Guy Fawkes's, you know, memory, they would do bonfires, and actually would cause chaos in the streets. So
Okay.
again, we're starting to get into even more rowdiness, all right,
Mm-hmm.
around
Mm-hmm.
that same time frame. So this is all within that span. So you can see how all these different things are starting to finally kind of shape up a little bit into what we're going to see soon down the road.
Mm-hmm. The, what I find interesting about that is the that because I don't know if it's because the way they treated this man, that the kids felt like they wanted to do this in his honor, or they felt that he just opened the door. Either way, it's just wild that kids would emulate something, that they would remember this guy, and in his honor, they're going around, burning little bonfires in the streets and
Right. Well, and they were
thing,
mocking him. They were
yeah,
mocking him, and just like with any legend, you know, emulation sometimes too, and whether it was mocking or emulating, these kids were destined to, again, they just started that trend. And I think it was just another excuse, obviously,
sure,
kids find excuses.
yeah,
So, but I think where we find our journey next is actually where we really kind of go over towards your late 1700s, even early 1800s, as we get into the newly formed Americas. The Puritans just could not stamp out the pagan Halloween stuff. They felt like this was all just pagan stuff, even though the churches were responsible for all that stuff.
mm-hmm.
They were just like, oh, I don't want none of it. We're purists, we don't want any of that, stuff. So they actually tried their best, but some Guy Fawkes celebrations made it across the seas. So some of the new settlers were celebrating Guy Fawkes stuff, and they were, still celebrating some of those old traditions from overseas. And
Sure,
not everybody was purists, or back then. So they a lot of the settlers allowed it. So
right.
again, it was just something that was starting to happen all then. Well, then we got into Civil War. So that's where we end up next.
Well, I'm a big Civil War buff, and I know my father was as well. So with that, excuse me, folks, sorry about that. We know that there was a lot of death with the Civil War, so I'm sure there's going to be something interesting that ties to your story that you're telling us.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned death, because that's what it all came down to. I mean, you got to imagine the Civil War was a very dark time for everybody, and very dramatic. But we had over 500,000 deaths that accumulated from the Civil War. And not only that, but there was so many unclaimed and unknown bodies that you had a lot of family members that just still wasn't even sure if their loved ones were going to come home or not.
Right.
Or there was just a lot of that. So the ghost stories were rampant. It became an era of ghost stories right after the Civil War. And of course, a lot of the stories involved soldiers coming home, or, you almost would think it'd be sad, but again, people were entertaining themselves. They didn't have the TV and the internet back then.
Right.
So this was their forms of entertainment, was exciting ghost stories and things like that. So this is where we start seeing the ghost side of things start to come in. But really what happens next after the Civil War, we get a huge migration of Scots and Irish immigrants. And they came in, and guess what they brought? Remember those Celt traditions, the Samhain festival, and some of these old world, even rural old world traditions. They brought them with them over to America. So now you get that October 31st all the way to that Guy Fawkes November 5th. You just got this whole time period where people have an excuse to start getting rowdy. And in fact, the Scots brought the bogeyman. And of course,
yes.
we know what the bogeyman is, the boogeyman, right?
Right.
So they actually were the ones to introduce the boogeyman to scare the children, because the boogeyman hides under their beds and taps on the windows and hides by every gate. They said, like, if you pass through a gate, there's going to be like a boogeyman waiting for you or something. So it was a very scary thing. So again, dark. This whole time frame, just dark. So it's really cool how we're really shaping up into those things.
Right.
And then, of course, we're going to have to talk about the classic pumpkin.
Oh yeah. Now is the the pumpkin itself, um, I think, is an offshoot from a tradition that they brought over with them, but they, I guess they made it bigger and larger because didn't they use a different vegetable?
Yes, actually. So what it is, the legend, right? The it was a
Mhm.
European legend, was a character named Jack O'Lantern.
Sure.
Okay. And Jack O'Lantern was so bad. This guy was so bad that he actually got kicked out of hell. Okay.
Yes.
And on his way out, the devil's like, look, and he just like scooped up some embers of hell and said, look, here, take these with you. And Jack O'Lantern actually put those embers in a hollowed out turnip
Mhm.
and would carry that around. Well, of course, this character, being this awesome character in these stories, kids started emulating by hollowing out turnips and putting candles in there. Okay. This, of course, would make it over to America.
Mhm.
Well, Americans, we started having pumpkins coming
Mhm.
in around Halloween.
Mhm.
So it was a natural improvement on the turnip, bigger, softer, easier to carve, and all that. So they started carving out the pumpkins and putting the candles in there.
Mhm.
Well, kids quickly figured out a crafty little trick they could do with pumpkins.
Tell us all about that.
Well, the kids figured out that they could take these pumpkin heads and put them on sticks, sometimes even put the sheets over them or put the sheets, around the bottoms of them. But they would go
Mhm.
around and go to people's like cabins and houses and stuff, and they would stick you know, that jack o' lantern up in people's windows as a prank.
Yeah.
So back then, I mean, imagine, again, you don't have TV. We don't have none of the movies that we have now. So imagine you just like look out your window and there's this scary looking. That's why they designed them. They'd carve them out and try to make them look scary
Sure.
with the triangular nose. In fact, the triangular nose was very representative of skeletons and death and things like that.
Right.
So they was purpose in their symbology of the way they carved them actually.
Mhm.
But yeah, they would stick those bad boys up there and scare people. Again, this is how we started evolving into a little bit of pranks
Right.
around that time of year.
And didn't
So,
they incorporate sheets as well? So maybe that's the sheet ghost that we see associated
right,
with Halloween,
exactly,
right? Yeah. Okay.
exactly. And of course, they covered all the dead in those shrouds, the sheets. So that in combination of the pranks with putting the sheets over the pumpkins, all also became the classic image of the ghost that is associated with Halloween as well.
Right. Right.
So, but hand in hand, see the Scots and Irish immigrants, they took the pranks up to another level from some of their old world habits with the Guy Fawkes stuff and things like that. They started raising up the bar and started smashing windows and like throwing rocks through windows and just they took the pranks up to a new level.
Mhm.
So as we actually roll into the early 1900s and like through the depression and even early 1930s, Halloween time frame actually became very much a scary place to be because it actually became very notorious for pranks. And in a lot of cities and things like that, they had mass fires, sometimes death, and of course, the depression. People didn't, they barely could feed themselves at the time, much less clean up after this. So this
Mhm.
became a very, very real a community panic for Halloween, believe it or not.
Oh wow.
Yeah. What? So really, what the solution is that the community all had to kind of come together. Um, Pretty much all avenues. One, of course, and this is a side note, but the imagery also at that
Mhm.
time frame in the early 1900s, some artists started putting together all the images that shape us as who we are. The horned devils that were, pictured in the Middle Ages. The witch, with the pointy hat, and the the ugly witch with the broom, riding the broom, and the skeletons and the ghosts and the jack-o'-lanterns, all the bats, all the imagery was being made into the art forms that we know it as of even today. So all that was going on in that art style deco back then. But again, the community efforts were like, hey, we need to get these kids off the streets and vandalizing our stuff. So they started coming out with Halloween parties, and they just really everything that you can think of, you can go back and credit somewhere where somebody had come up with an idea, a positive idea, to get kids off the street. So as they were doing this, one other thing happened, and this is where we're going to kind of finalize what became Halloween. Well, some homeowners had came up with the idea, hey, maybe I can buy off some of these pranksters. So, and back then, a treat that was easy for a lot of people to make back then was popcorn balls and caramel covered apples.
Sure.
Those were some classic desserts back then. So they started like paying off some of these tricksters, and the term trick or treat came into play. So again, trick or treat, it's not thousands of years old, but the term trick or treat is actually more like about 80 years old,
Right.
80 to 100 years. So yeah, so now you can see our journey, how much went into Halloween, and eventually how it kind of all got narrowed down to that culmination. And there's other little factors, I'm sure. This was just sort of a good summary of how we got where we are today. So when we talk about the veil between life and death, remember, Halloween is just one day. Okay. It's not always just that veil is the thinnest. I mean, it could be, and we can talk about that here in a second. So
no, amazing. That I always love when you describe and you talk about things, because you're always very detailed and you paint a picture. That's what I love about you, Josh. And
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, hopefully the fans enjoyed that. I loved it. And so it brought us from the beginnings to basically where we're at now,
Yeah.
So and on a side note, it's a huge commercial thing now. And I know we were discussing that the other day, and I just want to throw this in there for the fans as a little bit of trivia info. 25% of all candy is sold the week of and the week after Halloween. So just, put that in your head. 25% of all candy that's sold in a year in the US is a 2-week period. So, that's wild.
That's crazy. It probably goes in correlation with the stat about dentists and cavities too.
Oh, I'm sure, without a doubt.
I don't know.
I know.
I'm sure there's got to be a stat somewhere.
Oh, that brings us to fluoride.
If you know the stat, comment down below.
Right, yeah. Hit us in the comments on that stat. So with that said, man, let's jump into the veil. Let's talk about, the material and the spiritual. And there's a million theories out there. I know that I believe that it's more, has nothing to do with the time of the year, has nothing to do with dates, days, or any of this, or the way the stars are lined up. I fully believe when you get a group or a mass of people and their energies are focused on a certain thing, that it opens up doors, or it could present itself in the face of a miracle, even depending on whatever your spiritual beliefs are. So let's say we've got millions and millions of people around the world, billion probably, that are buying into the whole Halloween thing. That's energy that's being fed into the spiritual realm.
Right.
So if anything, there lies the possibility, because our energies are focused that direction. That's what's making it easier maybe for us to communicate with the other side, to see to the other side, for them to cross over. That's just my theory and my belief. I don't know how you feel about it, but
well, I think it's a natural progression for humans to feel that way because think about it. Let's go back to the Sound Festival, right?
mhm,
With the Celts and some of your ancient, civilizations.
mhm,
I mean, think about the seasons.
mhm,
Spring is life comes up from the ground, and summertime, and fall things die again, and the winter's dead. So
mhm,
you see these natural progressions in nature. And of
mhm,
course, a lot of those civilizations back then, again, they're not distracted by technology. Back then, they were focused on, farming and hunting and, surviving and building their civilization. So for them, they would notice these things in nature.
mhm,
They would see that this time of year things are dying off. And again, this is where I feel like the belief of, and maybe they even felt that, like, hey, we just feel like everything's kind of dead. We feel in tune with the death side of things. So they may have been onto something.
mhm.
It may be true. The veil could be a little thinner during those times. I mean, after all, we had these season changes, and life seems to have that cycle to it, and
Sure,
they were
sure.
probably in tune with it. But I do agree with you in the fact that I do feel like as a society in whole, you know, we are putting out that psychokinetic energy
Mhm,
as a whole,
mhm,
and we're more open to things. People want to be scared, and the excitement of Halloween, and everybody starts watching horror movies again, and that was a whole nother side effect of Halloween as well, was the horror movie genre,
mhm,
all of those things.
mhm.
So, it makes sense what you're saying, and it's a good theory that, yes, as a group, we certainly could be putting the energy out there. But I also think on that side as well, it's also that we're more receptive to it.
Sure.
Um, in one thing I talk about, and I go into more detail in my book, is that I believe that, you know, um, based on a lot of other things I found in my research, that there's different spirit realms. We're separated through different spirit realms, and it seems to be sort of frequency type
Mhm,
um, type of a separation. So you know, it's energy, it's different energies, and we're separated in those physical or those energy realms. And again, when we're more open to those things, we're like radios, we can sort of tune in to some of those things a little better.
mhm.
So the more receptive you are, the more stations you're going to pick up, so to speak. um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, and I think people during Halloween, they're going to be more receptive to those things.
Yeah, I subscribe to the frequencies. I am a firm believer that everything is on a frequency. Our bodies, there is a frequency that you'll pick up when you lay on the grass with your shirt off. You'll feel the energies of the earth, uh, the energies of the sun, things of that sort. So I've always had a strong belief, one, in frequencies, and the higher your frequency, the more understanding and more you'll be able to see things. And the lower your frequency, uh, you're less apt to run across or even see things because you're working at a frequency where you're barely functioning, I feel. And I feel like there are things around us that dampen those frequencies, i.e., cell phones, internet, any type of other 4G, 5G technologies. These things dampen the frequencies for us to be in tune with Earth itself, I feel as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know how you feel about that, but I do
Well,
believe that with the frequency, we're able. My dad used to tell me this. This was his saying: you will never see anything if you keep your eyes closed.
right.
So
That's
always
true.
keep your eyes open and look, because there's something there to see in everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing is with frequencies that, what I try to explain to people too is, like, think about a radio station. When you're driving down the road, and you hear the song, you hear it coming through your speakers and like this beautiful stereo sound. And sometimes you'll have those radios that'll display the artist and the song, and there's like data that's actually transmitted through those invisible waves, but we don't see that song, we don't see those things, it's all completely invisible.
Mhm.
And then in just a turn of a dial or a push of a button, you're on to the next frequency, a whole new song, a whole new world, all hidden. So if you know God was going to have these frequency layers of spirits and things like, or these, I guess you'd say, if he was going to divide the spirit realms, it would make sense that it's energy wise.
Mhm.
Again, so that's why I try to use that analogy of a radio as an example. That way, at least people kind of get an idea of what I was talking about. Like I said, you don't see
Yeah.
it. God keeps it hidden from us. But I do believe that yes, there's different levels of that spirit realm, where your dead grandma's not hanging around with some demon either. They're probably on a different um,
Right.
part or different level. And you can even go in and do research in depth and see where there's other scripture out there that does talk about different levels of hell, different levels of the spirit realm, different levels of heaven.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's out there.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad that we're touching all these little things. We're just kind of throwing soft blows at everything because everything that we're talking about could probably be a show in itself.
Right. Well,
And
especially when you talk about the veil between life and death. I mean, you have to kind of at least have a general understanding of the afterlife, or what you might believe it to be.
mhm. Sure. Well, I mean, look, you get a lot more spiritual activity during this time of year. You've got kids out there. All right, now here's the deal. You can buy a Ouija board at 8 years old. But you can't drink till you're 21. I find. So you can go dabble with spirits from the age of 8 on
Right.
on a Ouija board, but you can't get a beer.
Right.
No, but anyways, where I was going with it is during the Halloween season, you'll see people who would normally not be into this messing. Hey, let's break out the Ouija board and dust it off. It's been sitting in the closet. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? So that's putting that energy source. It's feeding. It's giving it more energy where that energy normally wouldn't be there.
Oh yeah.
Because you'll have the people who naturally do it on a daily basis uh, doing it, and then now you got other people who don't do it doing it. So it's kind of like feeding the fire, stoking that fire. So maybe that is helping to thin that veil, for it to come through. And that's how I look at it when I say that people are putting their energies into it. Is this time of year brings about people who normally wouldn't be into watching horror movies or doing seances or getting their cards read or going to a psychic to get a reading. They do it during this time of the year, because it's cool. So the energy is just festering,
Oh
and
yeah.
um,
Oh yeah. I mean, and the whole thing is they're more receptive
mm-hmm,
to the paranormal.
mm-hmm,
Again, and nowadays people binge watch YouTube videos, and hopefully they're watching your show and my show, and then some other shows, that all are talking about paranormal, and watching investigations and things. And again, they're getting into that, and they're getting open-minded about it, and because they want to this time of year.
right.
So just like you're saying, it's the fact that they may not do it through the year. Most of the time they're focused on everyday things, because we'll get to Christmas soon, and then the new year, and then they're worried about losing weight, and then they're worried about Easter, and they're worried about
Sure.
all these different things through the year, the end of the year for school, and then kids in the summertime. Now it's different. They don't always think about paranormal. Life happens,
Mm-hmm.
and then as we get to fall, and as things start cooling down, and we start seeing all the horror movies come on, the cable networks and stuff, and it just again, they start advertising it
Yeah,
places, so
yeah.
you get the mood, you get the vibes going.
Mm-hmm.
So next thing you know, people are more receptive, and they're more open to
Right.
those things.
Right. But also, people, you need to realize too, if you don't understand what you're dabbling with, don't open that door, because you can actually bring something back with you that'll attach itself that you're not going to know what to do with. So make sure you're not out there just joking around in the paranormal world, because that's one thing I always tell people. If you don't have the understanding, the strength, and the courage to step up if something does attack you, or the wisdom,
Or the faith.
or the faith, you're going to bring back something that it's going to torment you. So
Oh yeah.
be careful during this time, is what I'm saying. With that said, Josh, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Give me your craziest Halloween experience in life that you've ever had.
The craziest Halloween experience.
It could be
Well,
crazy fun. It could be crazy,
right.
or scary.
I would say that my craziest Halloween experience. Well, it would. I know exactly, and I actually did not, believe it or not. You will not find this in my book. I'm sorry. I don't give you everything in my book right now, but I give you some good stories in there too. But I had one year, me and a buddy was doing trick or treating. We had the pillowcases and stuff, and I grew up out in the country, and we had to pretty much run to the next house, And there was some houses that were fairly close together, in a way. I mean, like I said, it wasn't like they were all farms or something, but there was some farms around. But so we had to kind of run to these neighborhoods. Of course, back then though, we used to get the big candy bars, I mean, like the good stuff. And so that was the nice thing about being out in the country. By the way, you got the good stuff.
And you would fill up an entire pillowcase.
Right, exactly. And it would be, like I said, it'd be the good stuff, not just like the little stuff they got now. It's like usually the Tootsie Roll. Anyways, I hated black licorice. Anybody out there that's listening, do not do black licorice. No kids like it. And if there's kids that like black licorice, don't trust them. Anyways, so we're going to house, and there was this abandoned house, and it was spooky, and it matched all the things, So me and my buddy, we crept up to the door. We're like, hey, let's just go up there. And it's like dark, So we crept up there, and the door actually came open. I'm like, oh.
What?
It just kind of come open as we walked up on the thing. I don't know if it's because, I mean, like if the debunker in me is like, well, maybe, when we stepped on the porch, the wood shifted and the door, whatever. But the door kind of creaked open. So we went in there, and my buddy started going up the stairs, and I'm kind of like walking to the left, and I actually fell through the floor.
Oh, wow.
I fell through the floor, and it was so scary. And I fell through the floor. My buddy goes hauling outside. I'm scampering, trying to find in the dark, some stairs to get up there. I find a set of steps. I'm going running up, and I make my way back outside. And I swear to God, something was trying to grab me the whole time. But you know how that paranoia is.
Oh, yeah.
But it was definitely by far the craziest thing that ever happened. Because normally every other Halloween, it's like the normal stuff, trick or treating and things like that. But that was something a little different.
Right, no doubt. Wow.
For the normal.
Awesome. I love it. That's a great story. Great story. Hey, also before we go any further, I think it's time we can I ask the gauntlet of 5. It's 5 questions I ask every guest that comes on. And I know you're a guest / co-host tonight, special co-host. But I'm gonna put you through the gauntlet of 5.
Uh-oh.
And they're yes or no questions. Pretty simple. And it's just I put it out there, and sometimes people want to add to it at the end, but just a simple yes, no, or pass.
I got
all you need to do. You ready?
Oh, so I get passes. Okay.
Yeah, here we go. Bigfoot, do you believe?
Yes.
Okay. Mythical creatures like centaurs, mermaids, things of those sort. Have they exist? Do they exist?
Yes,
Okay.
and maybe.
Okay. Have we been to the moon?
I'm still waiting to find that one out.
Okay, that's fair enough. The firmament, does it exist?
Yes.
Okay. And last but not least, is the world flat, round, or as Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to say, pear shaped?
Isn't he pear shaped? I don't know.
Yeah, he's insane in the membrane shaped.
You know, I will say this. I know it's a gauntlet of yes and no's, but I will say, look, I have yet to be decided because I'll be honest with you. If the world is flat or if the world is round, I'm not sure. Can I trust the technology that's showing me that the world is round? I don't know. NASA has a bad record right now. When you look at the evidence that they presented, it doesn't. It's not copacetic. You know, there's some issues.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to answer that. You know, at the moment, I would say I'm still a round earther, but I'm open and I'm learning. I'm researching. You know, I'm always
where I'm at.
researching and always learning. So
that's respectable. That's where I'm at. I feel I share your sentiments on that. And actually, I've been delving around the internet. And I know this is totally off topic tonight. On different forums, trying to find one that I can bring onto the show. Someone who has their stuff together, that's a flat earther, and someone who is a globe earther that has their stuff together. And I'd like to get them on in a friendly debate on one of my big shows in the future. And I'm going to basically set two baskets in front of them. And I'm going to ask them questions, and we're going to say, all right, you know, yada, yada, yada. And if it feels like that it's more flat earth than round earth, we'll put it in this basket. If it's round global earth or globular earth, this basket. And then we'll have a basket for both. And let's see which one fills up the most, you know, and have a nice little maybe 45-minute debate on that.
There's definitely compelling arguments for both. I think when people when round earthers or when people that are sort of closed-minded, and I'm not saying all round earthers are closed-minded, but I'm saying the people that are closed-minded, if they don't at least investigate instead of just laugh about it and scoff, you know, just like round earth, you're stupid, you're an idiot. They shouldn't do that. I mean, I kind of used to joke about that too, believe it or not. At one time I used to be like, flat earth, come on, man, we're in the freaking modern era, man. We got like satellites and we've been to the moon and stuff, you know, we've had people. But then in all honesty, as I started doing more research as I got older, I really actually started to research stuff. And when you start seeing some of these things and you're like, and just as one example, and I want to get into this subject, obviously it's a different show, but if we're talking about it, people are going to have one good example. So in one good example, and again, don't take my word for it, go to NASA. Okay, look at their videos. NASA in modern era is trying to figure out how to send astronauts through the Van Allen radiation belt that surrounds the Earth. Okay, they're having a hard time figuring that out. Didn't we figure this out 40 plus years ago when we went to the moon the first time in little tin cans and little spacesuits, little space jumpers?
Yeah.
Okay. Supposedly we went through the radiation belt many times to the moon and back. But yet in modern times, they're trying to figure out how to do it. They said, you know, they were talking about some super thick hulls that they would have to protect the instrumentation and all these different things. That's just kind of one thing that's a little odd, you know. And when you look at the old astronauts and their interviews and them talk about the Van Allen radiation belt, they almost seem kind of whatever, you know. So seems very, very peculiar. So that's just like one main thing I just wanted to throw out there for
Yeah.
to entice people a little bit to do your own research.
Yeah, I stopped actually researching it because I was getting frustrated because the I laughed about 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. A friend of mine was like, "Dude, the Earth's flat." I'm like, I was like, "Dude, you're so stupid." Whatever. He's like, "Dude, go check this video out," and he goes, "Then start researching a little bit."
Right.
So, for about a 2 year period, I would research it off and on, and I was finding more and more eggs that went into the flat Earth basket. And
Yeah.
then I started saying, all right, well, I'm spiritual. I believe in God. Let me go to the Bible. Well, the Bible won't come out and just say it, but more eggs going into the flat Earth basket.
The
And
Bible very much is very kind of flat Earth. Just the descriptions,
yeah,
believe it or not.
yeah, and
The sun being stopped and things like that versus Earth stopping
sure.
if we were rotating and but anyways.
Yeah, no, I know. We don't want to get off on a tangent, but yeah, I always say it, folks, go find your own truths on that. And I'm hopefully I'll have a show in the future on that and get a couple of guys on here that are knowledgeable for both the globe and for the flat Earth, so we have both parties being represented. Because I don't want to say one way or the other until I figure it out in my heart. But I've kind of got a good idea. That's why I stopped researching it, because I was getting scared.
Yeah, it can be some scary stuff though when you start researching and I've found that the minute you talk to people about some of these things, they immediately get that cognitive dissonance
Mhm.
where they just start shutting down and they get immediately defensive because you're challenging their beliefs. And we were programmed ever since we were a child. We walked into classrooms with round globes and
Mhm.
we walked into in school we had cross sections of the earth that
Mhm.
showed the core. We don't know the core of the earth. We have nothing to tell us anything. The deepest hole we've ever drilled is 8 to 9 miles in
Yeah,
Russia.
I think 9 miles is the deepest, and
Right.
after that, we cannot drill any deeper. It just keeps breaking.
There's a lot of things that we are programmed on theories.
Hmm.
These are this theories about what's in Earth and even some of these
Hmm.
planets and things like that. These are all theories, and we were taught that as if it was
Right.
fact in
And
school.
what are theories? This is what I tell my children all the time. I'm just like, theories are nothing more than another man's idea.
Yeah.
It's not proven, and they will change numbers to make their theory relevant. if
Yeah.
if a number doesn't add up, then they'll bump it up by a point 0.9 or 1.6, or until they get that figure they're looking for. And then, hey, there we are. There's the theory of relativity. There's the theory of gravity. Here, these are all just men's ideas that were written down and a university signed off on it. So it's men agreeing with other men that their idea is law.
Right. Well, and again, I'm not saying that I'm a flat earther or that I'm a round earther or like whether I'm geocentric or was it heliocentric or
Mm-hmm.
flat earth. Again, I'm not sure exactly. Again, that's why I like to be open minded.
Me too.
I've tried to at least free myself
Mm-hmm.
to be open minded enough to accept those things. Again, a lot of times you start talking to people about flat earth or like I mentioned the book of Enoch or something, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God. And it's almost like like you're Satan
Mm-hmm.
himself. And people are like, oh, you're the devil. You're the
Right.
devil. Stay away.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
No, just
Mm-hmm.
do the research. Just at least check
Yeah.
some things out and be open minded about these things. Don't just blow people off on those things. And that's why you and I have shows like we do. We're
Mm-hmm.
trying to help people to at least hear some things. And as I always say, seek the truth,
Yeah.
right? So these are why we have our shows, why people like you and I, we have our shows. We're trying to help people to see some things, give them some ideas and let them go and make those determinations for themselves,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and then sadly, it's a small niche out there because a lot of people are afraid to look into anything that's not their everyday. That I always say, well, yeah, and this is one of my biggest sayings is people will stay with the herd and keep their head down. But it's the guys like me and you that are in that herd that lift up our heads and look and be like, oh, I'm going to go over here and check that out. you
Right.
know and does it put us in compromising positions sometimes? Sure it does. But have I been called crazy and stupid and a lunatic? Sure I have. But you know what, I've never been happier in my life, and my eyes are wide open, and I do not denounce anything. i
Right.
will i will listen to anyone, and that comes, I never bring up politics, but if you don't have my same views, I'm still going to listen to you, and I'm going to respect you, because that's the type of person I
Right.
am. And we don't have that nowadays.
Well, and it's another reason why I really wanted to sit down and write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, granted, my book doesn't get into like flat Earth and those type of things, but I really wanted people to be able to sit down and read my theories, kind of course, read stories about where I came from and some of the key moments in my life that, you know, made me who I am, or at least got me to where I am right now as far as my paranormal journey.
Mm-hmm.
And but I wanted people to read some theories that I had, to where I'm kind of piecing that big picture form together on a Christian level as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important. And then, the other things you can start tying in as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I just really wanted to write that book for people to have that, to get my voice out there, so people can start seeing past some of the current doctrines and programming that is going on
Sure.
out there.
Yeah, because there's a lot going on. And I also, we need to get back on track here, but I want to throw it out there. You've inspired Uncle Cletus, man. He will not stop texting me. Now he's talking about this Josh. Who's that Josh guy? He's got me wanting to write a book and blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know, man. I was like, I'll tell him to stop telling you that. But you got Uncle Cletus wanting to write a book now about his growing up.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I was, that's what I was trying to pass on to your uncle, was that, really he really needs to write that book about his days, because I know, even just from some of the stories off camera that he sat there and was telling me and you, some of
Oh,
the stories of some of his days back when he was growing up, man. That's some good stuff in there. So by all means, he should tell his story of
absolutely.
of things. So I hope he does.
Man,
I'll definitely get one.
oh, sweet. We'll see what happens. So, anyways, folks, time has really flown by tonight, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. We could probably talk for another few hours and keep you entertained, but the veil is there. We talked on different levels about it tonight. I gave my ideas and theories. Josh shared his. Is there any last minute things you would like to add, Josh, to this?
Well, again, I appreciate you having me on, and again, I think everybody out there should check out your show, and also your other shows, and come check out my stuff, because, like I said, Rich and I were both truth seekers,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's a journey. So come join us on our journey.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. The great thing about Josh's show, the Everything Paranormal Show, is it's live on Thursday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And what I love about it is, and I watch him, and he has other people that watch him as well, is he interacts with you, So as he's talking, he's fielding questions and on the spot answering, and I love that, because it's just, I love the interactive feel. I would love to start doing some big shows like Josh. So check him out on that. And he does have a few other channels. I think he has the Dad Mafia. Is that right?
Yeah, Dad Mafia. Yeah,
And
this is a little bit of a gaming thing.
yeah, I mean, hey, man, I mean, he's dabbled in it. And then you also, and I love this about you too. He also DIY. He builds his own lightsabers, man.
Yeah, if
And
I should go grab one, but
yeah, I mean, that is sweet within itself, man. And he has videos out there that They'll help you to DIY, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I have some tutorials to build your own lightsaber hilts. It's just a kind of a hobby of mine. I'm a little bit of a Star Wars fan, and
Me too, brother.
project between me and my son one day that I just kind of turned into a YouTube channel. So.
No, that's amazing, man. But look, brother, I've enjoyed your time tonight. Josh, I'm glad we've become friends as well. And everyone that I meet, I talk about you all the time. I let them know that you're an inspiration to me, and you keep me going too, and give me a plethora of ideas, and help me be a better host and researcher as well, and truth seeker. So thank you.
Thank you again.
All right, fans, folks, friends, God bless, stay safe, and have a wonderful night. We'll see you next week.
You don't have to let the money come between us. No, they're not even capable to feel us. Yeah. Why don't we just take the stacks and go to pieces?